Roll call.
Jizzle. Here. Neal.
Here.
Olson.
Here.
Luce. Here. Zittergruen. Hadley.
Here.
And Johnson.
Here.
Is there anyone who wishes to speak to the city council about anything that's not on the agenda? Seeing none. We have a representative from Sexual Assault Awareness Month proclamation. You might have to pull that down a little bit.
A little bit. Is
Yeah.
that good?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so I work with Riverview Center. We provide the sexual assault services.
You wanna
I
get
think
close to
you
it.
get
We provide the sexual assault services at Riverview for 6 counties in this area, and Winneshiek is one of those. So we're asking each of our counties to sign a proclamation for April as Sexual Assault Awareness Month. I can talk about our services if you want to know a little bit more. Yeah? Okay. So like I said, we serve the northern 6 counties, but we're in 14 counties and 2 in Illinois as an agency. In this office, we have 3 advocates, 1 bilingual advocate, and then I am the therapist in the office. All of those services are free and confidential and available to anyone who's either been a victim of sexual assault or is what we would call a secondary survivor, so someone that loves and cares about them. We have immediate supplies, food pantry, clothing, all those kinds of things. We also have a giant play therapy room for kiddos, so we get to do that. That's fun. I get to do that the most often, so I'm in there playing with toys for half my day. We respond to emergency calls with law enforcement, hospitals, clinics, wherever a victim might present that would like to have our support and assistance. We accompany victims to court, as well as their family members, help with accessing other resources if we can't provide those, just pretty much everything that we can do to help that person, what we call move from victim to survivor. So,
Recording in progress.
any questions?
Yeah, do you have emergency housing if someone needs to get out of a situation
That is an
temporarily?
excellent question. We do, and I neglected to talk about that. We do. We have a housing program that if we can have a couple of days to find some place, we can pay the first 6 months up to longer rent, depending on what they need to get on their feet. But we also can do some hotel stays. We work with the shelter in Waverly for domestic and sexual violence. So if housing is a need, we make sure that that happens. They need to be safe.
So the hotel situation, if you needed an immediate, you could,
We could. We try to work with the shelter first, but
Sure.
if we have to use, just because we want to maintain as much funding as we can for those emergency situations. We also get a lot of help from local churches. Sometimes they will pay for a night in a hotel, so we try to work with other resources as well. So,
thank you.
anybody else have any questions?
Where are you guys located at?
Our Decorah office is it's on Mill Street, but it's where Department of Corrections was, probation and parole. I don't know if you know where that is, but it's in that little mini mall that has like the laundromat and choice employment.
yeah.
So we're around the side.
Yes, yeah.
So it's
900 block of South Mill.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So we're
Talking to an old mailman, so I.
yeah. So we're around the side, and then we park our cars that face the street. So literally, if someone is there to see us, you can't even see their car. Like you have to go down that street to find whoever's meeting with us.
Great. Thank you for what you guys do.
Yes, thank you very much
Yeah.
for the work that you do.
Now, therefore, I'm Mayor of Decorah, Iowa, in and for the City of Decorah, on behalf of all staff and citizen of Decorah, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2023 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month.
Yes.
Thank you very much for coming.
Next time we need a little fanfare before.
Yeah, really. Okay, consent agenda.
Item A, minutes of the March 20, 2023 regular meeting and March 27, 2023 work session meeting. And March 27, Item B, claims. C, renewal of Class C retail alcohol license with outdoor service for Vesterheim Museum. D, renewal of Class C retail alcohol license with outdoor service for PPO Elks number 443. E, special event Vesterheim Museum, Sittendemai, May 17, 2023. F, tax abatement at 105 East Rural Avenue for Beth and Greg Eide, rehabilitation. G, G, resolution setting date for public hearing for Decorah 2023 street improvement asphalt resurfacing project. And H, consider a resolution setting a date of meeting at which it is proposed to approve a development agreement with WSSA Decorah VA LLC, including annual appropriation tax increment payments.
Move consent agenda for approval.
Second?
Moved by Luce, seconded by Olson. Any discussion?
Kudos to Travis for getting Setnamai correct off the bat.
I've been here 18 months, so I had a trial run last year. But thank you.
Okay, roll call.
Luce,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Chisel,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Neal,
Johnson.
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Conduct
Hadley?
public hearing on proposed fiscal year 2024 budget.
Recording in progress.
We're having a little bit of reverberation feedback.
who will say, I hear an echo of.
Someone have a Zoom link open maybe
That's what I was wondering.
on a laptop?
You muted? Okay. Okay, item 6 is the public hearing on the proposed fiscal year 2024 budget. Item 7 is the actionable item. The budget's been drafted as a result of various workshops with the council and staff for fiscal 24. We did have some bumps along the way, some changes in legislation that made us redo a portion of the budget. As a result of the reduction of the residential rollback, but that also gave us 30 additional days. We should have had this approved by March 31st otherwise, but now we have until the end of April. The budgeted levy rate is 16.40184, and council can approve the budget as presented or anything less than this public hearing, but it cannot approve any changes that would result in a higher levy.
Okay, I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this budget? About this budget, I should say.
It would be worth noting that one written comment, at the time the notes were done for the council packet, there were no written objections or comments, but we did receive one written comment objection today.
Was that the one included in the Dropbox from Lori?
Worcester. Yep. Worcester.
Worcester, is it? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I'll close the public hearing. Consider a resolution approving the proposal fiscal year 2024 budget.
Luce moves the budget for approval.
Second.
Motion made by Luce, seconded by Zittergruen. Any further discussion? Hearing seen none.
I'm sorry, I just had one quick one.
Okay.
Thank you. I did receive a few texts and, well, one phone call and one text from constituents today concerned about, the way the budget was presented as a raise from 16 million in spending to 20 million. I appreciate the context that local media provided, that a lot of that increase in spending was related to the one-time expenses. And I think additional context would be helpful for the public to know about is that there's a $250,000 going to Sunflower in this budget that is one-time money. This isn't a permanent increase in our budget. There's a investment in our roads to the tune of $365,000, which is using up kind of saved monies from previous years. That's not a permanent increase in our budget. And there's 1.5 million in new spending in just this budget for the airport. 1.25 million of that is coming through a federal grant. So a lot of the new spending in this year's budget is one-time expenditures. A lot of that one-time spending is monies that are coming from outside of Decorah. It's not new taxes. And I think that this council, following the lead of our great staff, has done a good job of finding good places to cut our budget and present a budget that makes sense given the legislative realities we face. So I just wanted to say thanks to the media for giving us some context, giving the public some context, and to say thanks to the staff and to my fellow council members for putting us in a position to make tough decisions, but I think sensible and fiscally responsible decisions.
Thank you for making those comments and making the distinctions as far as grants and outside money. Roll call?
Luce,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel.
Motion passes. Public hearing on resolution of necessity for the Decorah 2023 alley improvement projects.
Okay, so item 8, this is the public hearing. 9 will be the actionable item. I'll lump the description between the two. So, public hearing was set for tonight at the March 6, 2023 council meeting. Notice was sent to the adjacent properties and published for 2 consecutive weeks as required by law. At the time, again, no written comments or objections have been received. The resolution of necessity is required to be able to assess adjacent properties, a portion of the project. The proposed assessments would include grading, 2 inches of subbase, 4 inches of asphalt, approximately 10 feet wide, and 2 feet wide of concrete drainage flumes where necessary. And again, those drainage flumes would be applied to the whole block on a per linear foot basis on lot frontage. So it is being spread across the entire length of the block. Let's see here. This is all in conformance with the newly established alley assessment policy.
Okay, I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this item on the agenda? Come forward. State your, yep, that'd be just fine. Please state your name and address, please.
Jim Hogue, 303 Center Avenue. And my question is, how do we pay this? And is it over a period of time? And is this, excuse me, the assessment that I got, the actual cost, or will it be adjusted after bids come in?
Do you want me to answer?
Yes, please.
Okay. So it is the maximum. That notice serves as what the engineer's estimate is, and those numbers can adjust only downward.
Oh,
They cannot
you.
increase. And so that's the answer to that question. How? Historically, the council has given 30 days upon project acceptance and completion that you can either elect to pay the full value, or it can be a voluntary assessment on property taxes.
okay. I heard somewhere some of these assessments are over a 10-year period. Am I wrong on that?
So the length has yet to be determined, right, John? That's a later later resolution that the council has to approve that. We're not at that step yet, but historically it has been 3, correct?
5 years, unless you're a corner lot, I think then it's 10 years.
Okay. Thank you.
With-
That answers my questions.
Good. Thank you very much for coming forward and asking. Anyone else?
No, but I felt like we should have had a good joke for you too, but, and I couldn't come up with one fast enough, so.
He must be thinking.
Always got a good joke for me usually.
Okay.
Nuns are creatures of habit.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
In the spirit of Easter.
Yeah.
Probably one of the first times during a public hearing we actually had a joke. All right, I'll close the public hearing. Consider approving a resolution of necessity for the Decorah 2023 alley improvement project.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Chisel, seconded by Hadley. Any further discussion?
Just a question for Jeremy. Wow, Jeremy, you're ready to answer. I appreciate that. Thanks for going down to Dallas.
Careful. Oh, yeah.
My question is, presumably we can identify which alleys and streets are, or which alleys we're going to be looking at, more than a year ahead of time. And I'm curious, is there any way, if we could look ahead in the streets schedule, that we could send notice to homeowners earlier than we do? I think the first notice some of them receive is, you're getting assessed, congratulations, you get a new backyard. And that's a shock for some people. So I'm just curious, could we send them a letter a year out saying, this is in the city's plans, and just so you know, there will be an assessment schedule probably coming?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that actually aligns really well with what we'd like to do going forward. We've already started on next year's, just because of how long this assessment process takes and how it aligns with construction season. We'd like to start earlier. So yes, we can do that. And like I said, we know where we're proposing to go next year. And so we know, we want to present that to council as part of the street plan for your input.
Well, then I guess here, this is encouragement. The sooner the better, I think, for taxpayers to know that this is coming.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussions? Roll call?
Jizzle. Hadley.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Luce.
Aye.
Zittergruen.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Neal.
Aye.
Conduct public hearing on proposed amendment on the 2022 Bluffside Urban Renewal Area. Would you give some background on that, please?
Yep. So, like the previous two, item 10 is the public hearing, and 11 is the actionable item considered by council. So I'll lump the description in for both. The proposed amendment, a public hearing is required by the state of Iowa to do an amendment or establishment of a new urban renewal area. P&Z has reviewed the proposed amendment as required by law and found it in conformance with the city's comprehensive plan. The minutes from that meeting will be entered in as part of this public hearing. Notice was sent to Decorah Schools and Winnebago County Board of Supervisors for a consultation meeting held on Monday, March 20th at 11 a.m. There were no attendees, and we have received no written comments or objections at this time. So the plan amendment would take the area and move it west along Park Street and that frontage road there in front of Country Inn and Suites, encompass the newly created lots 1 and 3 of the Bruning subdivision. And the plan would allow for the Veterans Affairs Clinic to be built, and along with that, the developer building public infrastructure, the city capturing the additional increment created from the clinic, because this will be a commercially rented out space to the VA, so it will generate tax dollars. We can then turn around and rebate back to the developer the cost of the public infrastructure. The plan does say that's not to exceed $550,000, and the emphasis is on the cost of the public infrastructure. So if they come back with their true costs and it's $475,000, that's what they get. They have to show cost.
Luce would move the resolution to declare necessity.
Second.
No, this is a public hearing.
Oh,
Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this on the agenda? Seeing none, close the public hearing. Now we'll go. Mr.
so
Steve.
you don't want it? Luce would move the resolution to declare and start the process, this whole process.
Second.
Motion made by Luce, seconded by Olson. Any further discussion?
I just got a question. For the road in front of Country Inn, will this widen it out so that they can still have parking there for overnight?
So no, because parking is actually prohibited there supposedly, right, for year-round?
The existing road you're talking about?
Yes.
I don't know that we prohibit it. It happens, right?
Mhm.
But this project would not touch that road at all. That's technically a DOT frontage road. So I think parking will be a discussion point based on traffic that is seen there. But I think the road is wide enough, and based on the amount of traffic we would expect, I think one side parking could still be feasible.
Okay, any further questions? Comments?
That not to exceed number is that a rough estimate of what the infrastructure is expected to cost?
Correct. It was estimated around 500,000, and we believe that's accurate. The 550 is like a 10% contingency, but again, this is true and actual cost.
Do we have a ballpark for when this building, this development is fully on the tax rolls, do we have a ballpark for what property tax revenue it will generate?
It is well, the revenue as an aggregate, I could figure it out quickly, but it is believed that the minimum value will be $3 million.
Okay, thank you very
So
much.
current taxable value would be 90% of 3 million times our aggregate tax levy is around $37 aggregate. So
I should have emailed you
that's
this question.
I'll calculate that during a time.
I feel like that's an important thing that we need to be doing when we consider these tax incentives, is doing the math on how much money are we investing in the properties, how much, money will the community benefit in terms of property tax. I should have asked you the question earlier. It just occurred to me
think
that
it
I
came-
didn't
I
know.
Just enough time to do it.
I think
and
it
to
came
follow-
up.
I was
You just
vamping a
stretched.
little
we
bit
talked-
for
Thank
you.
you.
We went through, I think we did go through this when we discussed this.
Just to follow up on
Across
Steve,
all tax levying entities, we're looking at roughly $100,000 annually
and when will that,
property tax value.
when do they plan to be up and
They
running?
plan to break ground. I mean, they actually wanted to break ground before, right now.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Travis.
Yep.
Okay, roll call.
Luce,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Zittergrun,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel, Neal.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consider an ordinance providing for the division of taxes levied on taxable property in the April 2023 addition to the 2022 Bluffside Urban Renewal Area pursuant to Section 40319 of the Code of Iowa, first reading.
Okay.
Travis?
So the previous actionable item establishes the plan, including the urban renewal area. This ordinance is the final step, which actually creates the boundary and establishes what's called the base for urban renewal areas. So that way the increment, the additional taxable value that comes online, creates this fund that can be used for those improvements. So that's what this step in the process does. It could be used for direct incentives to the developer, but in this case, we're planning on using that for rebating the cost of public infrastructure.
Hadley will move to approve 12.
Second by Luce.
Motion made by Hadley, seconded by Luce. Further discussion? Seeing none. Roll call.
Hadley,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Zittergrun,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
It's first reading. Consider resolution conditionally vacating and conveying right-of-way easement to Interstate Power and Light Company in exchange for driveway easement and approving easement release and acquisition agreement.
All right, so I'm probably going to have John jump in here a time or two to help out with this one. We do also have a representative of Alliant that's helped in drafting this for consideration. The best way to describe this is take the Decorah Alliant MOU that we currently have. It's a non-binding agreement that said Alliant wished to build a new operations center on what's today Industrial Lane, and in exchange provide a new driveway to the north side of the property and do new underground infrastructure along that driveway as well, water and sewer improvements, getting back to the bicycle trailhead back there. And so this is one actionable item that will lump several steps together, so it creates a chain reaction once the Alliant site plan project is complete. Think of this as like the Quickstar site plan, where there was a release and vacation of all those different easements, but we needed to secure easements as well to put the city in a better position there. This is achieving the same thing. Once the project's complete, it then triggers the series of conditional releases of our easement and right-of-way, once we also secure the required easement and right-of-ways needed for that driveway and the underground improvements.
And did you have any comment on the issues of the road at all? Is that any different?
Mayor, I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
I asked him if he had any more comments about the road.
So one of the things that brought us to this discussion, if you remember on the original MOU, is Industrial Lane is a city street currently, built to city street standards at the time, presumably. The new driveway, as it's proposed, to not have the cost of a dead-end city street back to a bicycle trailhead, we're like, let's not do this as a city street. You do a driveway and maintain it as an easement instead. So this is actually, that's the route we pursued this, so that it wouldn't be a full-blown city street, but it is 200 feet longer, which in regards to snow maintenance, not an issue, right, Jeremy? You're not concerned about the snow side?
Was it ever considered to have just a bike trail back to that? I mean, to have like a trail back there as opposed to people driving on the driveway that's now not a city street?
Well, but that's where all the parking, like, so if I'm a visitor of the community and I've got my bikes on the back of my car, I have to park somewhere to get on the trail.
Okay, so it's not just a driveway, it's a driveway parking lot.
It's a driveway to that parking lot
to the
back
parking
there.
lot, yeah.
Yes.
Luce would move the resolution of conditionally vacating and conveying right away.
Second.
Motion made by Luce, seconded by Olson. Any further discussion? Roll call?
Luce,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Zittergren.
Aye.
Motion carried. Ordinance amending Chapter 1240, Trees and Shrubbery, second reading.
Okay,
That was-
second reading of the ordinance from last council meeting. This does have a lot of revisions as drafted by the tree board, as well as the two sections I pointed out last time based on the council's discussion during budget session. 1240.230, which establishes the urban forest utility, and section 1240.240, which says the rates will be established by resolution. So it doesn't necessarily create, it creates the utility but does not set any fees opposed to it.
Have you had any feedback on the first reading?
Have you received any? No.
Hadley will make a motion to move forward 12.40.
I'll second.
Motion made by Hadley, seconded by Neal. Any further discussion? Roll call?
Hadley,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel,
No.
Olson,
Aye.
Luce,
Yes.
Zittergren.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consider an ordinance amending chapters 1228 and 1232 and multiple sections related to city sidewalks, second reading, or an alternative first reading. Can you explain that?
Yes. So actually, the last meeting was run so efficiently, we weren't able to talk about an alternative that staff had been discussing along with John on snow and ice removal on sidewalks and the current enforcement route versus the alternative that we're proposing as well to council for consideration. Currently, it is a municipal infraction. You don't shovel or remove ice off your sidewalk. It's a municipal infraction, which you need to be provided notice of the violation, time to abate, and then if you still don't do that, yes, we can then go ahead and remove the snow and ice for you, but the additional enforcement measure of if this is a habitual problem, which we did have one very specific property, but have a couple that are habitual offenders, then we start the municipal infraction process, which, as John will point out, is not a short one. So by the time we actually get municipal infraction drafted and onto that property, chances are the sun has already come out and the snow and ice are gone. So what the alternative would propose is actually making that a misdemeanor as opposed to a municipal infraction, which sounds worse, right? But the fine imposed is actually less. So a municipal infraction can have a fine of up to $750 per occurrence, whereas a misdemeanor is a police officer shows up, writes you a ticket, and after court costs, we're estimating around 165, 170, right, Dave? Yeah, somewhere in there. But we believe that would be a much more effective enforcement measure, that we would still have the practice of door hanger. You've got 24 hours, get your snow and ice cleared. You failed to do that, somebody in a blue uniform is going to show up, and you're more likely to respond to that than you are Greg with a door hanger.
They're black uniforms, Travis. Okay.
And
My crayon box has 8 colors in it.
and in alternative A, John gets involved, and in alternative B, John doesn't need to be involved.
Correct.
Billable hours make sense.
Well, I would,
Here's the caveat.
yeah, I mean, if they dispute it, then it goes to court.
Right.
Then I'm involved.
Yeah, right.
But I wouldn't be involved in, the misdemeanor would just be drafted. I mean, it's a simple form that would be filed by the police officer.
But this would hopefully streamline the process and make it go much quicker. So,
And if we do the alternative reading, B, whatever,
right.
the previously approved just dies for lack of action, or do we have to rescind that?
There we go.
Nope. This is just, would be considered a first reading of the ordinance again because it has additional language inserted,
Change
if that's
it,
the
yeah.
route council wanted to go.
Quick question then, in terms of process. This typically works when someone calls in with a complaint. Is that what triggers this process?
We are getting more proactive, I will say that, but you are right, we are very much complaint driven.
And now instead of an email showing up to you, it could end up going to public safety and
It would still go to Greg first. So Greg is our code enforcement officer. It would go to him first. He would tag, but then if he does not see improvement, then he's going down to PD and they show up.
Got it. Well, I mean, I think our police department has been extremely helpful with the new snow ordinance in helping create better public safety and quality of life for the city by engaging in those kinds of enforcement actions. And you know, I assume you've been brought in on this, so thanks to y'all for stepping up on this too, if this is the direction we go.
And we do hope that having to utilize the police department to issue these as misdemeanors is minimal, but quite frankly, it's going to be way more effective.
Just- Go ahead.
I was
Let's
going to
see
make a
it.
motion to amend the chapters and go with the alternate first reading.
Is that sufficient?
I don't know.
That'll work.
Okay.
Motion made by Olson,
Second?
seconded by Luce. Any further discussion?
Were there two alternatives?
Nope, just the one.
Okay, I got confused. I've done that before.
Okay, roll call.
Olson,
Aye.
Luce,
Aye.
Jizzle,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
That's first reading. Consider an ordinance setting water rates, first reading.
All right. Get there in my council packet. Got a long council packet. Okay, so during budget discussions for fiscal '23, so last year's budget discussions that we had, it was identified that the water and sewer rates, we were anticipating a 2-year increase that was going to be 8 and 4 for 2 consecutive years. However, during this budget year discussions, fiscal '24, we pointed out that the 2 years of 8% inflation as it relates to CPI for urban consumers, which is not a good correlation to what the actual cost of operating a city are, with cost of steel up 30%, other building materials more than that even. The budget was drafted with a proposed 12 and 6% as opposed to the 8 and 4%. If you're looking in the council packet, item 16A, during those budget discussions, council wanted to see how Decorah related to some of our neighbors and other comparables. So 16A, titled Utility Rate Comparisons, compares Decorah in its current state, a 12 and 6 potential increase. 12 and 6 mean 12 on the water side, 6 on the sewer. And I am lumping these two discussions a bit together. And Decorah 8 and 4, 8% on the water, 4% on the utility, or sewer, excuse me. With the other comparables of Waverly, Independence, Charles City, and Cresco and Waukon as neighbors. Decorah and Waverly are the only two of those that calculate water or bill water based on cubic footage. So I had to do some reverse calculation. I had to get Jeremy involved because there were numbers and engineering. So I calculated everything out on a per 1,000 gallon basis so that we could be comparing apples to apples. But additionally, Decorah along with Waukon are the only two communities here that bill on a quarterly basis as opposed to monthly. So I also had to calculate, because you've got base water charges, base sewer charges per bill, but some of those are incorporating 3 months if they're billed quarterly. So the very bottom is based on all the numbers on the top of the spreadsheet. The bottom set of rows, bottom two, are a user of 6,000 gallons in a month, what they are expending annually and then therefore monthly on their utility bill for water and sewer in Decorah with proposed increases, and the comparable cities. As you can see there, the Decorah 12 and 6 would put water and sewer at combined, this is water and sewer combined, at $72.83 per month. Charles City was the lowest of the other comparables at $86.53.
Okay.
And they just did was it a $20 million plant? Yeah, 20-some million dollar wastewater treatment plants. That number is going to go up.
This is super helpful, and I hope that when the articles come out about the increases in water rates, it explains how low our water rates currently are, right? So even with this, even if we did a 12% rate increase and we hit that 72.83 per 6,000 gallons, we're still well below anybody else.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, so.
Is there some reason why most of these other cities do it on a 12-month or monthly basis? Is that a bad question?
No, it's not a
No,
bad question.
no.
I mean,
That's a
why
very
don't-
good question.
No,
Why don't we move
I was just curious
one
as
of
to
the
why,
reasons-
because it seems more efficient to do
One
it
of the
on
reasons
quarterly.
our rates are lower is, Todd, the last time we replaced water meters in town was how long ago? 20? And they were purchased used. Now a water meter, now granted this is a bit of a sales pitchy type thing, but water meters, the vendors will tell you they should be replaced on roughly a 10-year rotation, because anyone that wants to say that their water meter has malfunctioned and their bill isn't right, they are probably correct, because the meter has most likely slowed down and we are under billing usage. Because as the meters age, their components slow down and are no longer as accurate.
I can speak to this. I had one freeze, and my bill went up about $20 a month when I lived on Pershing. So
When you thought it out, it went.
yeah, when we got it replaced, it was.
My water meter is just fine.
But I'm saying that to preface, again, our utility rates are extremely low because we have not been replacing some of our components of our infrastructure. We have not been, even the radio reads. The radio read installs were how many years ago, Todd? So radio read installs, which is drive around, get pick up instead of going up and touch padding every house. Updated 7 years ago, that isn't even the most up-to-date method of collecting that information. And we've talked about our now implementing that we take credit cards as a form of payment. This is a result of us, I'm just going to put it bluntly, pinching every penny and not spending any money to maintain a lot of pieces that we should be, or providing additional services that our credit card use is pretty high, even passing on those payments. So getting us more technologically advanced, part of the reasons we're not is where our rates are at. We can't afford to.
Why did we use 6,000 gallons when you all were coming up with these comparisons with other towns? Is 6,000 a typical usage?
It's so hard to say what the typical is. I mean, if I'm my family's going to use more than 6,000 gallons. Steve, you're not going to use 6,000 gallons. So that's kind of a middle of the road. That's maybe a family of 3, 4 would be about 6,000 gallons.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hacker Nelson's audit seemed to say that basically last year we were fairly neutral in terms of depreciation in our water enterprise utilities and our income to those utilities, expenditures including depreciation and our revenues. Do you think that their assessment's wrong because we have so much deferred maintenance, or are you saying that basically we need to take more income in because of that deferred maintenance that we didn't collect enough revenue for in the past?
I would say the latter is more. Not that Hacker and Nelson with their depreciation is inaccurate, but knowing we're going to have that out there, as well as additional investments we should be maybe making to our systems. Again, modernizing, as well as again, just putting it bluntly, we have not been doing a very good job of maintaining not staff, excuse me. The staff has been doing a very good job with what they've had, but we are not doing anything other than bare minimums for water and sewer utilities. Our road use tax fund has actually paid, or local option sales tax, excuse me, has actually paid for the majority of water and sewer improvements in Decorah because we tie them to street projects. So we can do that.
Yeah, it's definitely time to end that. That's not a good subsidy. It's not good governance.
Okay.
If we were to
Have you said that before?
if we were to embark on a program to replace meters more frequently so that they're more modern, and would it also increase any other efficiencies for collecting data so that we would save money by doing it?
Here's a huge benefit to the homeowner. Right now, billing quarterly with a radio read, if you get your meter read and then you have a basement toilet that the flapper doesn't seat properly and just runs and runs and runs, it hasn't caught for another 2.5 months. We've had utility bills in the thousands because just that happens. And it's not caught until the next time the meters are read, and we get a high usage. And then we send notification, hey, you've got something going on. More advanced meter systems can actually give you a to the hour or to the even like 15-minute increment. Yeah. So we could actually get hey, at 3 a.m. you used 500 gallons. What you might want to check something out. So
Now, when cities put new meters in, is there a charge for that? And does the city do it, or do you have to hire a plumber to do it?
So when it is a replacement on a not your fault, you didn't freeze a meter, no charge currently, correct? And so if you freeze one and you break the frost light pops off or something, you're negligent, then it's on you. You have to pay for it. And as far as the install, it's a plumber, right? Are we doing the meter install or a plumber?
If it's the normal routine day-to-day where a meter quits and whatever else. Yeah, if it's a routine maintenance thing where the meter goes dead or if there's another issue, we usually do that. Normally, if it's a freezing issue where the back of the meter popped and whatever else, they call a plumber and the plumber takes care of that stuff.
But I'm asking though is if we were to do a program where we're trying to replace every meter every 10 years or something, you know, would the city do it or would the homeowner have to bear the cost?
What I would anticipate is we would replace it. What we've talked about is possibly even getting to the point where the homeowner buys the first meter, and as long as you're not negligent, we would continue to replace everything thereon moving forward, but you just buy that first meter. Unless you want an irrigation meter, then you buy that one too. But
I'm just curious. I'm
yeah,
curious
we
too.
would
As to
replace it at our
how
cost.
much staff time would it take to replace, you know, every meter in town? I don't know. A lot.
I think one thing is, two things we have here. One is the ordinance to consider for the raise. Secondly, if you want to do more work on exploring that option, is to have it with a utility meeting or whatever.
I will say we are still a bit of ways from being able to afford that.
Okay.
That type of upgrade.
Okay.
The city of Waukon is going through a meter upgrade right now. They're putting in all radio reads from a company. They're putting in Badger meters. They actually hired a firm to do it. They've been at it for about 3 months, and that's with an outside firm going in and doing all of the installs. If for some reason there needs to be plumbing and whatever else that needs to be upgraded, fixed, or whatever else to retrofit the new meters, that's an expense on the homeowner. But they hired an outside firm to do their installs.
Do you have any idea what the costs they're looking at for that whole thing?
We
Did they take
got
like a
some
bid?
estimates, was it a year ago? When we had asked just a ballpark figure of what meters we have left to put in that are radio reads and have somebody else do it. And I want to say it was $100,000 to install. Was it that much?
So before you have an aneurysm about that, if we were to move forward with implementing a project like this, I would not envision every 10 years it's every property. It's you take the community, divide it up into 10 sections, and you tackle it 10% a year. And that way it's absorbed into the department. And now maybe years 1, 2, and 3 we need a little help, but I'm not envisioning every 10 years it's a one-off.
Was there some thought that when we did fiber to the premises that we would tie in the metering and stuff with that process too?
That's always been part of our discussions in every fiber to the premises model. We want to make sure we have enough strands that we can do smart metering on the water side, as well as even having additional strands for should Alliant or Black Hills want to do the same.
Hadley will make a motion to approve the first reading of the water rates.
Wait, do we need to decide?
Well, it is drafted, I was just going to point out, it's drafted at 12%.
Yes.
Okay.
Luce will second.
Motion made by Hadley, seconded by Luce, and a 12% increase, first reading.
Travis, given that Decorah is, home to like higher than average percentage of vacant homes, vacation homes, second homes, houses that are utilized for Airbnbs, but mostly during peak seasons, I'm curious, how do we come to what our base rate is and our marginal rate? And I guess prompting this question is, are we sure that our base rate really recoups the cost of providing the actual pipes in the ground, whether or not people turn on their faucets in their house? I want to make sure that our base rate covers the cost of the possibility of water getting to the meter, so it's not subsidized by user fees from people who are residents year-round.
Right. And I think the council's heard me have this conversation maybe before, but absolutely agree with you. You want to make sure your base, the reason there is a base and a consumption side to each system, the base is meant to cover the cost to get water and have it turn on when I turn on my tap. So the pipes in the ground, the booster stations, everything associated with the distribution system. The consumption is what it costs us to treat that actual water and get that water, the actual water going through your tap. I will say we have not had a full rate study done to make sure that we have these attributed appropriately. Anecdotally, I will say I think these are some of the better situations that are on maybe a little heavier on the water base and less on the consumption.
So you think they're in the ballpark, especially compared to other Iowa communities?
Mm-hmm. And you can see I do have the bases of others and the consumption, water use of the other comparables. It's all broken out there. And so when I use water use, we're currently at $3.26 per 100 cubic feet. So when I do the math, that's $4.36 per 1,000 gallons of water. We are right in there with Charles City, the lowest at Independence, the lowest at $3.79, in Charles City at $4.29. And then you've got $5.05 for Waverly, $5.71 for Cresco, and $6.50 for Waukon. But yes, you're right. You got an inherent cost on getting that water to the premises, and that's what the base is meant to cover.
When we're raising rates, or we're raising both? Is that how it works? Thank you.
Yep, we apply that to both.
Yeah. I'll say one more thing, which is just I want to echo Emily's comments, encouraging people in the public to take a close look at the council background Excel spreadsheet that lays out, why it is that even though this seems like a big increase, it's barely keeping pace with inflation. It's paying for increases that should have happened but didn't over the past 50 years. And it's paying for depreciation that we've already experienced in terms of the cost side. We need to make sure that the revenue side balances out because it's worth it to have good drinking water in our town. I hope you all take a look at that and see that even after these potential increases, we're still getting water out of our tap at a much lower rate than Waukon. So please do take a look.
Did we want to add to this that Todd get up at 3 o'clock and check the meter too?
Okay, we have a motion.
The cost will go up then.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Padley?
Aye.
Luce?
Aye.
Neal?
Aye.
Olson?
Aye.
Zittergruen?
Aye.
Johnson?
Aye.
Chisel?
Motion carried. That's first reading. Consider an ordinance setting sewer rates, first reading.
I move the ordinance.
So we've got a motion made by Zittergruen.
8%.
I think it's
That is
Right,
how
yep,
it's
yep.
drafted.
Okay.
Yep.
Second.
seconded by Olson. Any further discussion?
Sorry, that is drafted at 6. That is a
was gonna
typo.
say.
That
I
that
was
is a
waiting
typo
for
that
you
we
to
caught this
change
morning.
that. Yeah.
Friendly amendment,
Yeah.
Mayor and John, is that okay?
Yes.
Then I'm going to, my intention was at 8%. Kirsten, are you okay with that as a friendly? Okay, thanks.
Second.
So we're actually 6%, correct?
No, 8%.
8.
Okay, I just want to make sure. All right, any further discussion? Roll call?
Just so I
Oops,
can
sorry.
clarify, so we are doing 8% instead of what is the 6%?
That's his motion.
I would say
What?
8%.
Travis, that's what you, I'm sorry, the reason I'm saying 8% is because when I look at Travis's spreadsheets, it still seems as if that increase
Okay.
puts us more than competitive with our neighbor communities. And I think it's a smart thing to make sure that our revenues match the costs that our system experiences, whether or not we raise the revenues. So
But his spreadsheet is 6, not 8.
it says
That's
8.4.
correct.
Oh, I'm
So
looking
that's-
over one thing. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I'm
I
sorry.
did the same thing when I
That's
tried
right.
my
I looked to the
notes.
right instead of down. Thank you.
Yep.
Well, let's
Yeah.
all take a breath then. What should it be? Let's go
So
with.
6 would
Yeah.
be the, yes.
We're good
Let's-
with 12 and 6 is the first thing I'm looking at. I'm going to go with
Correct.
6 then.
Okay,
One
All right.
one more fix.
All right.
Everyone good with that?
I will go with that.
All right, thank you.
Second.
Carrie, will you just restate it before we do roll call?
The ordinance setting sewer rates would be at 6%. Because the budget was put as 12 and 6. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, now roll call.
Zittergruen. Olson.
Aye.
Luce.
Aye.
Hadley.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Chisel.
Aye.
Neal.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consider farmers market lease. You want to check report on that? I don't
Yep.
think there's much change in it.
It's the same lease, just dates adjusted. It still has the per event fee in there. However, resolution approved last year, resolution 3272 allows for the council to go ahead and waive the per event fee as well as an in-kind contribution.
I make a motion to approve the farmer's market lease with a waiving of, with an in-kind donation.
Second.
With what they charge their vendors, they can afford $16 for the city.
Do we have any overhead from streets or public safety in the setup of the farmers market?
No cleanings or anything?
No labor overhead?
I told them we weren't fixing that
Right,
part of
yeah.
North Valley, so. That's covered in the lease that they gotta carry that. I would say electricity maybe.
Do we provide that?
I think there's some that connects to that pole there on the north side.
Randy, I appreciate your point. I also think that the rest of the year we allow people to use that space for free. And so I think it stands to reason that we shouldn't charge the farmer's market, which is much more interesting than 16 or 17 parked cars.
Beneficial
I don't
to
think
the
we
community.
should charge the farmer's market if we don't charge the cars.
Okay, just a minute, let me clarify this. We have a motion made by Neal, and I'm going to say seconded by Zittergruen, since there are
Okay.
two voices. And now we're in the discussion part.
Well, there's just a lot of actual businesses, though, that are down there. It's not Joe's Garden coming down there. It's a flower shop from Riceville that comes over here and sells, and one from Postville that comes over here. They're actual brick and mortar businesses there. They're given a break over and above what our local businesses get, so, and they get charged, I think it's $25 per day to set up shop. So there's no reason the farmer's market can't kick back some for, not kick back, that's a bad term. Can't pay for the use of the electricity and any other city services that may incur.
I would speak to the point of the benefit of the community of having additional vendors come be part of that overseas and is worth the in-kind donation the city might give.
Not only that, as we think about ways in which we contribute to economic development of our downtown, the farmers market certainly brings people downtown shopping in the region, and so I think it's advantageous for the city to be a player in this as well. So I say we provide the in-kind.
Depends which merchant you talk to.
Okay, the motion is that, is it approving it with the in-kind?
Yes.
Yes.
It's a small enough incentive, I think, that it would be as expensive to collect that money as it would be to not. So,
Okay, you ready for roll call? Roll call?
Neal.
Aye.
Zittergruen.
Aye.
Luce.
Aye.
Hadley.
Aye.
Johnson.
aye.
Chisel.
Nope.
Olson.
Aye.
Motion carried. Discussion on C3 Historic District zoning.
Okay, so council may remember it's been a couple months. We had some light conversation on the C3 and the C3 district, and more specifically, the historic designation of certain streets downtown, because not all of the C3 zoning is considered our historic district. And so there was some discussion on possible changes, whether it was to look at an additional zoning classification within the C3 zone that might be a smaller list of permitted principal uses, or potential overlay zoning of C3 that puts additional restrictions in place. And so I did have some council members that asked that we have this conversation and that it then be potentially, it has to go to P&Z for their consideration and review and come back to council after that.
Can you give me a for example of why this would be beneficial?
So, for example, if council says, one of the things in the C3 zoning that might not be a good fit for Water Street, let's say we want to focus on water, Winnebago, Washington, I know those have been some of the ones discussed. C3 district includes a lumberyard, a bowling alley, any number, city hall. No, we're residential, if I remember right. I think we're residential. But those might not be uses that you want to have on Water Street, on those historic in those historic districts. And so if that were the case, what I think the best route would be is to create another zoning classification that says, here are the permitted principal uses we want in our historical district, and lay those out, much like, and think of R1 is the most stringent of residential zoning districts. You're allowed to do essentially single-family homes, handful of other things, but single-family homes. R2 is 2 and 4 family homes, but also allows for what was in R1. R3 is multifamily homes, but allows for R2 and R1 as well. You could do the same with a new commercial zoning district in the historic district, that this is the much more strict limited use, like our R1, but the C3 zone includes everything listed in that new zoning, plus whatever else is appropriate for downtown, but not the historic district.
Just from a historic point of clarification, there was a bowling alley downtown. There were several bowling alleys downtown on Water Street, and the state is pushing for the entertainment district creation. And I think that if we look at our historic district and realize the fact that what we really have is an entertainment district, we have retail in there, but largely people are coming to eat and enjoy themselves and whatnot. And while I can certainly respect the history of our area and the work of our Historic Preservation Commission, I think that maybe making something more restrictive, where when times are changing economically, might be potentially damaging economically. So I would just question, given the fact that we already have a historic district designation for the buildings that are historic, and we have a Historic Preservation Commission actively looking at things in the Water Street area, I don't know that I would support anything that would be more restrictive on property use over and above what we already have in place.
Would you just see it staying the same?
Yep, just leave it the same, and then look at what comes down for the entertainment district, because I just handed Jeremy off the file that Roger Brooks, he was a tourism consultant that came over a decade ago, but it's been a while. But his concept was the 1,000-foot walkable city, and every 1,000 feet you have something that draws you. And if we turn ourselves into something that's historic and not living, I think we risk being historic. So I guess nod to the history. I think we're doing a good job of preserving and protecting through our Historic Preservation Commission. I don't see the reason to codify anything more restrictive in the C3 when we realize that downtowns are changing with the times, just like in the past there had been bowling alleys on Water Street, or there had been car dealerships on Water Street, or there had been gas stations on Water Street. I'm not saying that all those things are good ideas now, but it was the market that changed it. It was the market that allowed the bowling alley to move because the bowling alley was on the second floor and people couldn't get there and whatnot. You know, it wasn't an ordinance. So
What is the state using as a definition for like entertainment?
it's just you just create an entertainment district.
I mean,
so
what do they consider qualify as an entertainment district? I mean, what types
You-
of businesses are?
well, I'd have to give you the code.
Okay.
But the entertainment district allows you. It's kind of like a SMID,
Okay.
in that it allows you to create a surcharge in that district to support things that would enliven your area and whatnot. So I guess just from a former building owner standpoint and who has seen changes in our downtown and encourage the fact that we don't have a high vacancy rate, I don't know why we would make things more restrictive. We already have we have protections in place through our historic preservation and current zoning. So, unless something new would prevent someone from knocking down a block and putting up a parking ramp.
You can.
can.
Right, exactly. That would be the only thing, but I think we can handle that through site plan.
So
We can't.
We can't.
No,
We
you can
can't.
do that by right, and we have no way to stop it.
So I hear you, Russ, and I sometimes think that the times are changing, and if we want to make sure that we plan accordingly, sometimes that means we have to shift our ordinances, right? So when I think about the small towns that I drive through between here and Cedar Rapids or even into Postville every morning, I see a place where there are retail businesses that would love to be on their main drag but can't be because of the things that are already there, like churches, right? And I see this new trend of what I would say private places in public spaces in terms of narrowing the ability to create public spaces, public places, like even a bowling alley, right? Somewhere where people can go and exchange commerce, things like this along the way. Because when a building is empty and people are looking for space, then they'll want to do anything in there. And for the most part, I think that should be done in a C3 district. But on our Water Street, I think we want as vibrant of a downtown as possible. And for our retail businesses, I think that means keeping as much retail as we can there. And to me, that even though a restaurant is a restaurant and retail is retail, it still is an exchange of goods and services in a way that you may go eat and then you might go down to the bookstore, or you may eat and then you might stop by the kitchen store. But there are ways in which you can close off those public commerce places, and the same thing doesn't happen. So I guess for me, I do see a distinction between trying to protect Water Street, and I wouldn't actually want to see a parking garage on Water Street, but I wouldn't mind one on a side street.
But
So-
we did propose a parking ramp on Water Street. We were going to build above. We wanted to build above it, right?
But that was only if that parking ramp wasn't on like the Water Street side, right? We'd already talked about preserving the park in front of it. So
Right.
no,
But
I
we've-
wouldn't. I
we've-
wouldn't
we
have been
codified
for
that, right? Didn't
I
we?
wouldn't have been for a parking ramp that butted up against Water Street that didn't have either retail space or that park in front of
Right.
it.
But we've already taken care of that.
We haven't taken care of that. We still can do that. That was when we did that planning. The idea was that then we would do this overlay of a more restrictive downtown on Water Street per se.
I think maybe thinking about it in terms of more restrictive isn't where I'm coming at this from or why I asked this to be on the agenda. I'm not interested in having more rules for one part of our C3 than another part, but I do think that our C3 within itself has two very different parts to it, and I think they merit different rules, which isn't to say more restrictive and less restrictive. It's to say that there's something unique about the no setback, dense commercial streets that are part of the historical designated neighborhoods, Water, Winnebago, Court, the other one. They're different. They feel different. They're the places people want to walk. They're the places people drive from all over the Midwest to come and visit and support our local businesses. And I think our current zoning code has us in the tricky position of having to make rules that are equally applicable to that part of our city as they are to the bowling alley or to the Haymarket or the bank across the street from Haymarket, which is just to say that that our city is so lucky to have this vibrant downtown core, and that's the testament to a lot of things. But frankly, I think our zoning code right now puts it in some danger of bad development. Not that every development's bad, but it is in danger of, let's say, a business owner who said, I want a lot more parking next to my business, and I'm going to tear down half the block along Water Street and make it a surface parking lot. I mean, let's say a bank did that. They could. In fact, in our C3 code, it says you can have a parking lot, a surface parking lot, by right. And there's no site review for that. You just get to do it. I think we ought to look at what makes our C3 district great in its diversity and make sure that our code allows for both, or for what exists currently, and doesn't allow for things that would take away from it. So
That'd require changing the C3 status.
I think it's silly to have two things, and I mean we've run into problems in the last year already, feeling like we needed to write rules that applied in one place, but not liking that they also applied in the rest of the C3 district. And they're two different kinds of places. Along water, Winnebago, the no setback, densely populated, no parking. I think we need to ensure that what makes that part of Decorah great is protected by our zoning ordinances, and I think we can then give more freedom to people who aren't part of that. If not more freedom, maybe the current C3 rules are good too. But that, I don't want to get in the weeds on the actual discussions. I feel like this potential change simply acknowledges that there is a difference between the majority of our C3 district, where we're okay with kind of surface parking and set apart buildings, and the historic district, which is different. And I think we need to ensure that we protect what makes it unique.
I think
I'm not a business owner or a building owner. I never have been, but I have lived in this community for a long time and participated in seeing the changes that have gone on over the years, from banks moving and just in the last few months we've seen a number of successful businesses literally switch places on the block to give themselves the better space or more space or the kind of space they want. And I really think that I would hope that most of those people don't want the city council meddling in what they do with their property. And I think that what's happening and what's happened in Decorah over many years is businesses are successful in Decorah, and we aren't the kind of town like Galena or others where it's sort of like you're at Disneyland, where everything is just identical, and everything is, there's historic aspects to it, but it's I think our business owners deserve some credit for being smart business people and taking good care of the downtown as they have. And I think that you may endanger those businesses more by inserting the government into those decisions that they're making as entrepreneurs and business people.
Yeah, I would stand with you, Kirk, if what came back to us from P&Z in any way told local businesses, you can't switch places, you can't try something new, you can't innovate. But I do think that there should be different rules for Water Street and, the block we're on here. And right now there aren't. And I'd hate to have a bad developer, come and bulldoze a block of Water Street, which our zoning code allows.
That has happened before. Decorah Bank and Trust bulldozed a big block and put in a beautiful bank building. Viking Bank expanded their bank, and they tore down a building next to them and built a pretty nice bank and a very convenient place for their customers.
But a person could, they didn't, but they could have just put in another parking lot there. And that's the thing. It's that, we've been lucky so far, or that these things haven't happened. But saying that because they haven't happened in the past doesn't mean they wouldn't happen in the future. And I don't see what we're doing as being restrictive, other than trying to keep the downtown vibrant and think about the limited space that is there. I think Steve put it well in terms of it's not the same as every C3 district. It should have its own district and its own code, so that when we make decisions in a C3 district, we're not having to say, ooh, if we do that, that's about to look like that we would be impacting Water Street in that same way.
I think when I think economically, at least in this particular time period, it's hard to get businesses to come in, and I wonder what kind of effect that may have on somebody that wants to come in, and if that would be discouraging to them.
Well, Mayor, think about it from the perspective of people who want to bring a business to the parts of the C3 district that are not on Water Street or Winnebago or Cord. Right now, a lot of our C3 design criteria are rooted in the assumption that we're making rules for Water Street, right? But if I wanted to open a, I don't know, doggy daycare somewhere else in the C3 district, and I wanted to have, parking on the ground floor and my business above, we don't allow that with our current code. But with more appropriate distinguishing between what makes Water Street special and what's possible in the rest of our C3 district, we could say, hey, that's a possibility. That'd be worth considering. We can give more freedom for development outside of that historically designated area while making sure that what makes our Water Street special is protected.
I think I just will go back to the Historic Preservation Commission and the National Historic Registry, the designation that we've been given, and the protections that are afforded to the buildings and the credits that are afforded to the buildings. If Main Street Iowa and Iowa Economic Development was coming forth and saying, hey, cities need to do a better job of being more judicious and protecting look and feel, because is that what you're trying to? Is that what you're shooting for?
Not just look and feel, vibrancy.
How do you legislate? How do you legislate vibrancy?
Yeah, but how do you? I think Steve gives a good point to the idea of the freedom for the rest of the district, right? Let's say you really did want to have on first floor parking and then something on top. We wouldn't necessarily want that on Water Street, but next to Fairway or in any other place would make sense. In the same way, if you wanted to live in your business, right? We currently don't allow that in a C3 district, but if we...
But we do.
It's not on our code. But anyhow, we could then change that, right? So that you could essentially have your apartment in the back of your business or run it in the, of your shop or store. And it wouldn't have to be on Water Street. Again, trying to prevent that change to a continuity of shopping experience, shopping and dining on Water Street.
Yeah.
Let me just say that I wouldn't trade our downtown for any other downtown in the state of Iowa or Minnesota. I think that our downtown is fabulous. I mean, there are changes and there are sometimes empty building fronts, but they don't last for very long, at least historically. And I hope that continues for a long, long time.
Yeah, who do you think you're arguing against, Kirk?
Yeah, I feel like you think that...
I'm just saying don't mess with it. Don't meddle with what people are doing with their own property.
I think that's a risk. I mean, I think that's what other towns are saying, and they haven't done. And so, unfortunately, I think I'm trying to be proactive to something that might happen as opposed to changing what we have, right? So I guess I agree with you. Our downtown is exceptional, and I want to keep it that way. And in order to keep it that way, I think we have to essentially outline in law what we have so that we continue to have it that way. Because right now we don't. We have provisions. We saw it with Quick Start, quite honestly, where things can happen that we're not intending, but our code says one thing, and we have to go with what our code says.
I guess
if our code isn't actually describing the downtown that we envision and that we have and that we love in a way that I think it should, then we leave ourselves open to potential development or potential things that would happen in our downtown that we wouldn't actually want to see.
I guess my concern is that, we have a place that is a building that is currently, or that, let's just say that it was an apartment complex, and somebody wanted to put in a hotel, and we said no urban hotels or no urban grocery stores just because they take up too much space. We want the standard retail buildings. If we kill that vision or that ability, you look back, if we would have done that, we would have eliminated the Hotel Winnebago. Now, granted, it's currently for sale, but that's the problem with overlooking something. Or, Rubaiyat. wanting to put in a big enough restaurant and taking out walls on the first floor to accommodate a space. Combining buildings. Would we allow people to combine buildings in this new code, because it does change the look and feel of the space? Or would you allow somebody to knock down something and put down an urban co-op? Like a big enough building for.
Yeah, but Russ, you're making these presumptions that somehow we're going to build a new code and we're going to make all these restrictions. That's not what I see.
Okay.
I see that we have a new code that then applies to the Water Street that we can then, if we say we're going to do something different with the C3 district that we're not going to do with Water Street, that we have the ability to be nimble and say what we want to do in C3 isn't impacted by every decision we want to make on Water Street. Or if we want to do something different in Water Street, we're not impacting the rest of that. So I guess I'm not saying, I don't see us creating a code that says you can't have a hotel, you can't take out your walls and windows. Maybe I'm saying we have a code that says you can't tear down an existing building and just put flat parking. I don't know. That would be for us to discuss. But that's the whole idea of creating this ordinance. We don't know what it's going to look like or this new zone. But
I think the collective we a lot, like we want this and we want that. Well, we, meaning us, we don't own that property down there. And we don't control the ownership or the businesses that are in there. And I think that we should keep our hands out of that.
yeah, but we are designated to make code for a city. We're elected to create a code that determines. I mean, you could say that about anything.
Codes allow for things to happen.
Yeah.
And that's I think a better way to look at it. And I think back just a few years ago when J.C. Penney closed its doors, everyone was worried about what's going to go in there now. Now it's one of my favorite places to go in the world with my granddaughter and my wife at least a few times a week to have coffee and to see friends and to meet, and who would have thunk it?
But someone could have taken that. Someone could have.
Creative people who own these properties, who spend their lives building businesses, and we aren't thinking about that. We're thinking about what you're imagining the city of Decorah to be for you.
No, I'm not. I'm seeing what happens.
You're being
That's
ridiculously
ridiculous.
I don't understand where you're coming from at
Hey,
all.
just,
I
let's,
think I'm being.
there's got to be some type of
it's
an
a
order.
market. It's a free
Okay.
market, folks.
I think what Kirk and Ross are trying to say is that the changes we might make today that we think are going to correct things may have unintended consequences down the road that might restrict things. And I think that's a very well thought out idea on that.
Thank you
that
for
type.
saying it
Yeah,
that way.
right.
It's well said. May I
Okay,
then?
No, not just right
Mayor?
now. Okay. I want to check with Travis. Do you have clearly, this is a discussion. Clearly, it's a discussion that we need to have. How do you approach, what's a suggestion for approaching it?
Let us talk.
Right.
No.
It's a good
We have what
discussion.
you
It's a
talk.
great. This is a great discussion we're having.
I understand that, but I also can see that there's a lot to discuss with it. What would be your suggestion?
Do I look like a deer in headlights? Or
No, you look at somebody I can
all right.
check with to see, get some direction.
So clearly, I don't have enough to take any kind of direction on how the council as a whole wants to advance. Whether it's we want to send to P&Z to pursue, an additional set of, a new zoning classification for different rules. Don't touch anything. Dare we actually do it, but maybe muddy the waters and something that might be not for discussion tonight, because I'll be honest with you, I'm going to have to do some more research on this possibility. Instead of pure zoning and zoning code, if you go with form-based, form-based zoning, where it's less focused on the use and what the permitted uses are, and more is about how it fits into the space of that zone. It might be something for consideration of council, but this is going to be a large undertaking because it is not at all like what we do here currently.
When you say form-based, are you talking about like size restrictions, or what do you mean by form?
Well, those can be applied. It's more about, what do you got for the direct quote there for the Wikipedia?
Yeah, this is the Wikipedia version of it. While traditional zoning like Decorah has and most cities has focuses on the use of property, form-based codes, and I think Iowa City has this in some of their zoning districts, prioritize the form of buildings. So their zoning code actually has a lot more diagrams to show this is what's allowed and what's permitted versus talking about the uses. They get into uses somewhat, but that's not the focus. The focus is on how does it look? And this isn't like necessarily our C3 design review. It's the shape of the buildings, the location of the buildings on the lots. So, and it might be, it doesn't have to be all form-based. It can be a combination of things, form-based and what we have now.
So if part of the discussion is making sure that it's a dense development where it's zero setbacks and more walkable, that you're not having an area that's torn out, then you're get a small building built setback in mid-block. This form base would actually lay out that in this specific area, your building will be more or less up against the setback. You will be up in front, and this is, can you send that to Jeremy so he can pull that up? Yeah. Jeremy, if you can click on this link and do a screen share. Like John said, it takes zoning and turns it into pictures and says, this is what you will do in this specific area. Your building will look like this.
Mm-hmm. Orange City does that really well, right, Kirk?
I feel like that's.
Yeah, I mean,
we're really far into the weeds here. I think it's really important for you two to hear this. I don't like the zoning suggestions that you don't like. I don't want to tie business owners' hands from making creative, adaptive responses to changing market conditions, and nobody has proposed that. There's a famous quote from G.K. Chesterton when debating with an atheist. He said, "I don't believe in the God you don't believe with either." Right? I feel like the same thing's happening here, Kirk, where you're heaping up all these like aspersions and innuendos about what diabolical plans we have for new rules along Water Street. Okay. Here's my plan. I'd like us to just be able to make different rules for different parts of our city that are very different. And I think that right now our code doesn't let us do it. Here's cards on the table. The only change I would make to our current zoning code, if I could, do it on my own, which I can't, for Water Street, is that I would just make surface lots not an accepted use along Water Street. That's what I'm scared about. And right now, you can do it. You can buy a vacant building for $100,000 and bulldoze it.
Good luck.
And we can't change our code for Water Street right now without also changing it for out here. And I want surface parking lots to be legal out here. I'm asking, the reason I asked for this to be on the agenda is I think that P&Z and the council, not that they should change all the rules, but that if they want to make different rules for Water Street to protect it than they do for other parts of the C3 district, which are very different, I want to give them that option. And if the voters don't like it, then they can vote for other leaders.
But it's P&Z. It's planning and zoning. Kirk and I have over 17 years of service on P&Z, so we understand how it works. We understand spot zoning and the ramifications, I think.
I served on the Board of Adjustment for many years before I was on the City Council. So it's not like I'm a neophyte to this. And I'm not demonizing all of you. I'm just saying that I think business owners have a pretty good idea of what they want to do with their properties, and that they've been widely pretty successful in Decorah.
Part of it, I think, is clarity as far as what it would look like, what the type of thing you're talking about would look like. That's what I would like to have a concept of what it would be.
And if we want to talk about form-based code for the entire city, then we can talk, right? But I think that trying to form-based code a specific area without tying financial impact to it, or financial incentives or an economic development plan is punitive. I would be much more supportive if you're concerned about people tearing things down and putting in parking ramps, that we put some money into facades and we make sure that we don't have vacant buildings through economic development rather than through zoning. So, I hear you if that's what your goal is and your concern, but I think there are ways to do it outside of. I don't know how you can create more codes that aren't restrictive.
Do you think our current codes are too restrictive?
I do not.
So we already do have a lot of rules about what's permissible in the C3.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, sometimes it seems as if the code is trying to do two things. Talk about what's permissible at the bowling alley and talk about what's permissible on Water Street. Do you think that some more nimbleness and flexibility would be useful for that? I mean, this last year, I feel like we've had some difficulty even talking about underground parking because of the fact that our zoning code doesn't distinguish between the two neighborhoods that are very different.
Yep.
I
guess I also see things that are non-compliant, that are, so there's code compliance, there's planning, and there's zoning. I feel like, I feel off like that our city is not planning, but it is zoning. So if you feel that the comprehensive plan, I have heard the comprehensive plan should be reviewed. I have heard that Main Street is a priority. I think there are ways to do these things. I'm just not sure that an overlay is the way to do it. And I guess this is a very vague mention, right? It wasn't a proposal or anything like that. It's just discussion. So I don't want it to end adversarially or anything like that. But I just strongly feel that a more restrictive code could potentially affect our tax base. And if we really look at what our C3 is, from a strong towns approach, it is our most valuable asset. And if somebody is willing to take a building and tear it down and turn it into a parking garage, I'm not saying I necessarily would be 100% all in on that, but we also have to look at the fact that it would increase parking in our downtown, or that they have to have the means to be able to tear down a building and put up a $3 million parking garage.
Okay, but I do think that you're overlooking the fact that zoning is how we actually navigate planning. I mean, we can plan all we want, but we can't enforce any plan unless we actually have a zone and an ordinance to determine that plan, right? So zoning is our mechanism for determining planning. And with the approach you're suggesting, we would have no planning and no say. And I think that the reason it's on the agenda isn't necessarily that we hammer out all of these things, but that we recognize that we want a place, that we see that Water Street and how we treat Water Street and zone Water Street, therefore plan on Water Street, should look different than how we plan this area or that area or any other commercial area in our community. And by asking P&Z to take a look at this, maybe they will come back and say, we do think you should have two separate districts. They should have the same ordinance as they are right now. But if you ever want to change something along the way, you don't have to feel like you have to change it and then not change it because it's also including Water Street, to separate the two out.
Right.
I feel like this is somewhat a 2 and 2 here. I would like to see this go to planning and zoning, which means that I feel like members of council who have not spoken, in order for this to go to planning and zoning, would need to speak and share if this is something that they want. Because at this point, I feel like we are split council on this.
Well, and I guess that I feel that we could be doing more planning. We, as a council, could be doing more planning, but I don't know that planning and zoning is the plan for the downtown. I think that if we want to do planning for downtown and support our downtown, it's through economic development that's targeted into that historic district to support those buildings, to preserve them, is the best way to do it, not through zoning.
To go to a point to where it could start Does the council have to vote to send it to P and Z? Like say, would you please take a look at C3 and come back and offer suggestions?
Wouldn't require a vote, but what would require, in my opinion, a vote is if council
Tell you what
said,
you want.
we want this. You
Okay.
take a look at it, review it, send it back to us in whatever way, shape, or form you want. That's not where council's at today.
No, it isn't.
I don't object to Planning and Zoning Commission discussing issues such as these. I just object to dictating to them, we want you to do this, and we want you to do it this way. And that's what I feel this is about. And I think, if P&Z wants to discuss anything in the comprehensive plan, that's their bailiwick. They can do that. And if they want to take a look at the transcript of this discussion and then start a discussion of their own, fine with me.
So that's 3 votes.
But I don't think that we should be dictating to them that, we think there's a real problem. And obviously, our downtown is in jeopardy. And I just don't agree with that.
I guess I concur with what Kirk is saying. I think P&Z, that's their specific job and duty, is to look into the planning and zoning. And if they would like to take a look at this and make some recommendations or hear their opinions in reference to it, I have no problem with that at all either.
So
I don't think that's what he said, though.
I will just point out, P&Z just reviewed the C3 specifically in its totality during those discussions of possible parking ramp, and so they did just review this within the past year.
I'd like them to ask the question, would it make their job easier to distinguish between the 2 parts of the C3?
It would make mine a lot easier.
Oh, that's interesting to know.
Because otherwise, I'm trying to figure out what 7 people up here want.
Yeah.
And
Let's ask planning and zoning if they think it'd be helpful to distinguish between the 2 different parts of C3. And if they say no, it's fine to have one zoning code that applies to all, that's great. But I'll vote with Kirk against anything that makes things more restrictive, and I'll continue to reject the insinuation that anyone suggested anything but that.
I just want to make sure I'm clear on, when I said it would make my job easier, it's if I know where all 7 of you were at and what you want me to draft. That would make my job
That's a very
easier.
different.
I just want to be clear about that. Whether it's 2 zones that are applied or not, that's my job. What would make my job easier is if I knew what all 7 of you wanted to see.
I would like to see 2 different zoning districts, and if planning and zoning is a place to see it, then, and what those districts look like, that would be in P&Z's purview, but I don't think that we should be treating Water Street in the same way that we treat the rest of our C3.
So when you say 2, one would be Water Street, and
Yep.
then the second would be everything else but Water Street?
Yeah, the C3 district.
I would like the boundaries for that, if it were to come to pass, to be determined by, or proposed by P&Z, because I could imagine not just Water Street, but the block to the south of it along some of the main streets, because they seem similar in character. But I think that'd be a good suggestion to, again, throw into PZ's court. Frankly, I'd be okay if we just had the exact same zoning code we have now with 2 different districts, so that future councils could make rules that affected one and not the other. Or
Looking at the same-
remove rules
You're looking
that
at the
affected one
same
and not
2,
the other.
right? Water Street is 1, everything else is 2.
I think that P&Z is probably that they should make the suggestion in terms of what the potential boundary should be. For me, if I had to say something right now, I would say that the boundaries should be defined by the current historical district. So that'd be the block south of Water Street along Court Winnebago and Washington.
Winnebago, Washington, Maine.
I guess,
Not Maine.
why is it necessary to put restrictions on what P&Z looks at? Why can't we make it more generic? Like, are there suggestions you guys would make as to what any changes you would like to see in the C3 zoning district? Can we be that generic with it?
And they just reviewed that.
They just reviewed it.
No, but it's not changes in the C3 district. It's actually taking an overlay of a new district, separating them out.
Part of it. I mean, if they wanted to go that route.
Yeah, but was that even brought up to them that it could be I didn't know it could be a different district until we brought it up in a meeting when we were looking at that code in the first place. So when we had the discussions about the C3 district after P&Z looked at it, we talked about creating an overlay for the historic district, right? That was the first time I even thought that was possible, right? Or that we could do that.
Well, we should go to the zoning training again with her. When is that? We got an email about
I
it.
sent that email out here, last week?
Well, they
Week before?
have it, it just isn't in this area.
Yeah, Dubuque, I think, was the
I think that was the closest. But
Yeah.
can't you go online and work with that?
So as the liaison to the
Again,
SMID district, I would like to ask how SMID district fits into C3 and this discussion, and it not be separated, but be included in the discussion.
Okay.
Well, that's just another framework that you could say,
Right.
the SMID district, or the National Historic District, or the Water Street District.
Correct.
You know, I mean, it's just creating multiple overlays over and over again.
And right now, we have a set of restrictions and rules that applies to everything that you just talked about.
That are
And
exactly the same.
all anyone has suggested tonight is that we distinguish between them because they're different places.
Except the SMID district has different zoning.
Okay, we have to either, we can't come to a consensus, but we have to figure out, okay, what is the plan to be able to explore this and look for?
How about I put this on the P&Z agenda for them to have the very similar conversation. If P&Z as a whole says, we just reviewed this, we don't, I will report back to council that that was the result of P&Z's discussion. Or P&Z can pick it up and run with it. And I will say that the potential downfall, for lack of a better term, is that what council gets might not be what council had in mind.
They do this work all the time. I want to hear what they propose.
This is their bailiwick, so to speak.
That would be one way of doing it, and to get feedback from them.
I would agree, I would like that.
And that's what I'll do.
I only want to hear what I want to hear.
That's why we're going to have this conversation.
Okay.
All right, I will do
Clearly,
that.
we've got more discussion. This isn't putting this off.
I also want the governor to resign, but what I want doesn't.
Okay, let's go on. Okay. Rescind appointment of Bill Courtney and give 30-day notice to appointment John Mollers to Civil Commission.
Yeah, so.
We all looked at that, didn't we?
Yep, so thank you
Oh.
very much to Bill Courtney for his willingness
Yeah,
to.
very much so.
But
I talked to
there
him.
were several of us that missed that. Bill had only been a resident of Decorah for only 2 years, and Civil Service Commission is I believe, the only board that we have that has a residency requirement, and he hasn't lived here for 5 years. And so council, we have to rescind that appointment, as well as the state code actually has a publication, and I'm using air quotes, of appointees to civil service for 30 days. So this would essentially put the public on notice that John Moeller will be considered in 30 days for appointment to this position.
And that would be May 1st, Monday.
I'd move to rescind Bill Courtney's appointment and give notice on the John Moeller appointment.
Second?
Motion made by Luce, seconded by Olson. Any discussion?
Is a 5-year requirement a state law, or is that just a city ordinance?
State law just has that they have to be it does say they have to be a city resident. I don't think it has that 5-year requirement. I don't know.
It is in our code.
But it is on our city code, yeah.
Well, speaking for myself, while I think this is the right way forward, I'd like to ask staff to come to us with an amendment to the ordinance. I don't think that 5 years of residency confers any special ability to serve on the Civil Service Commission. I think there's some wisdom in the fact that that's not part of the code for the other boards, and I think that the mayor and council should appoint people to the board based on their qualifications.
Can we deal on the motion we're dealing with? And if he wants
Sorry,
to
you're
make
right,
another
Steve.
one,
You're
bring
right,
that
Steve.
up, he can do that.
Yep. Okay.
When can I bring it up otherwise, though, Steve?
You just did. Okay. Any further discussion?
Well, is anyone else okay with what I just suggested in terms of asking council? Should I put it on a future agenda? I mean, if the council doesn't think that's a good change.
What was the historical perspective on why they made it a 5-year residency requirement? I guess that's the only reason I would,
Know the
only thing I would
city?
ask.
What did you say?
To know what the city, what's involved in the city.
Right,
It could have been what's involved with.
And is there anything that would require someone on civil service to need that more than any other commission?
Right, I guess that would be.
Well, only only the duties that they, maybe it's in relation to the duties that they have.
Because we're not making the officers haven't had to live here for 5 years.
Yeah.
The other ones need a residency requirement.
No, the other ones don't need a residency.
No, he's saying maybe they do.
Okay, how about if we vote on this motion first, and then we decide what to do with it? Okay, roll
Staff will
call.
prepare an ordinance that gets rid of the time limit, still resident. If I hear otherwise, then we'll go
Okay.
from there.
All right, we have a motion and second. Roll call.
Luce,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Zittergren,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Chisel, Neal.
Aye.
Motion carried, and then you will bring forth
Yep.
a suggestion for changing the residency requirement. Okay, vacancy on Board of Appeals. I asked Carrie and Travis to put together some kind of an informational piece to have on our website about what that is, so that if people are looking, we didn't have anything on it.
Now, still have 5. Have talked with one individual, tried to talk about putting in for this while he happened to be in to talk to Greg based on his background. And he asked, well, what's the commitment we're talking about here? This is a board that's existed for at least 2 years, and we've never used. So I'm putting that out there to
Okay.
people that are concerned that they're going to have meeting upon meeting and upon meeting. This is a board that's existed for 2 years, and we have not utilized yet.
Okay, the issue that I have is the fact that we don't have anything on our website that really states what they would be required to do.
Yep, other than our
Because
code.
nobody-
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
So
the code.
is it not listed under boards and commissions? Is that what you're saying? Okay, can we list it on the website under boards and commissions with descriptions?
I think it is. And it doesn't state what their responsibility is, even though we haven't had an issue or a question about it.
Internet's being really slow.
No, I looked for it and didn't see it.
I recommend you file an appeal.
I just want it listed so that see people are even looking.
Just trigger it, and then see what happens.
Yep, we'll get that. We'll get
Thank
that
you.
on there with
It may
5
not
vacant
make any
positions.
difference. It may not make any difference for whether anybody wants to apply or not, but they should be able to go on. I shouldn't get a call that says, where do I find the information on the website when I can't find it? Okay. City managers report.
Okay, so tomorrow at the library at noon, that was we had a scheduling conflict. So at the library, lower level, the Housing Steering Committee for the Rural Housing Readiness Assessment meeting will meet with ISU Extension Outreach Community and Economic Development staff and have discussed the survey that's been out there. The committee staff, I primarily went through a worksheet with the ISU Extension and Outreach, presented it to Housing Steering Committee, and said, all right, here's what we're going to discuss as part of this program. So that'll all be discussed tomorrow at noon in the library. Last week marked the...
One more. And that's open to the public,
Yep.
but the committee is working on it.
Yep.
And that, in the grant, we had questions that they had to be able to fill out, and that's what we worked on in order to discuss it for tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a worksheet that I
just
filled out
Purely
and presented to
information
everyone.
that was coming from the city.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
does your city have a code on property maintenance? Does your city have a code section on this?
Yeah.
Are there programs
Yeah,
that?
there's
But yeah, that was
gathering
prepared
of
ahead.
information. Okay, thank you.
But that'll be discussed. Last week marked the second legislative funnel, and so in order for a bill to still be alive, it needed to make it out of its introduced House and over to the other side's committee. However, if you're a Ways and Means, and there's a few other provisions in there that are exempt from funnel. We've already actually seen the first resurgence of a bill that didn't make it through a funnel, can then just be reintroduced as a Ways and Means bill. There was an MFPRSI. I don't know if you saw that one that was in the Senate. It did not get voted on, so it didn't advance through and go to the House. So the House has a companion bill, House file, that was introduced as Ways and Means instead of state government. But that's a workaround if you need one. But with the second legislative funnel, that's when most of the policy all gets hashed out and starts to advance. We haven't seen any action on the property tax legislation or local option sales tax and commercial property rollbacks that were introduced. Haven't really seen any action in the last 30 days. Now that the second funnel is passed, that's when we'll start to see if it gets legs or not and grows. So keep an eye on that. That's all I have.
Carrie? Anything from departments that we haven't talked about or you hadn't put in the thing? We'll go this way. Steve Luce, do you have anything?
We're still concerned about the legislature imposing upon people who are hungry and trying to, as I understood the fiscal report on the House file that was passed, or Senate file, whatever it was, is that 320 state employees would be needed to be able to watch over the applicants for the SNAP program at a cost of some $12 million a year. And to me, it's other states have done that and have now stopped doing that because of the expense and just the amount of busy work created by it. So if you can, I believe Bergen did vote against it in appropriations, but it's still moving on. So there were hearings, I believe, today about it as well. But the concern is people who are hungry being discouraged because of all the paperwork I have to fill out to be able to get food to them. So it's not a good thing to do. Wednesday there'll be a SMID meeting, that I'll be attending that.
Okay.
And I think spring has sprung, fall has fell, winter's come, and it's colder than usual.
Steve Zittergruen?
I first just grateful for robust conversation over an important issue tonight. I know that we're all strongly opinionated people and care about this city deeply, and that's why we're here. And I'm grateful, Mayor, that you let us talk to each other. I think that's really important for the city. And I, regardless of which way this thing goes, I think the conversation is important to have. So thanks. I had another thing, but I forgot it. We're good. Go Hawks! Proud of those Iowa ladies. Jeremy didn't cheer hard enough, or didn't tip off the refs or something, but we'll get them next time. Okay? That was fun.
The housing survey, if people haven't taken
Thank
that, I wanted to mention that
Yeah.
maybe we could ask the media to again give a push on people completing that.
We had a March 31st deadline, but was that, I mean, they could still do it, wasn't it, so that they would have enough data to be able to come back for a talk?
Yeah.
But people could still be submitting it. Okay, that sounds good.
Which is on the first page of the city
That's
website.
correct.
Thank you for bringing that up, Steve.
I haven't heard from Scott latest number.
2.
Okay, no, it was 148 at one point, and that was a while ago. Okay, Ross?
Even though I'm not a woman, I did experience Women's Weekend Out this weekend in downtown. It was nice to see the crowds and whatnot, and the special activities and things that were going on downtown. It's just nice to see the vibrancy. And in the good news section, Senate File 516, the acquisition of land in public parks did not make it through the legislative funnel, but 516 was put forth because the Senate was saying that we really needed to focus on maintenance. And I just want to ask anybody who wrote in to say that they didn't want to support 516. I also asked them not to support 516. But if maintenance is really the issue and the state is concerned about maintenance, we have a beautiful state park in Decorah on a condemned road. So I would ask that the state really look hard at the maintenance that they were pushing forward to help cities maintain their public property and to potentially purchase new property to make things inclusive or accessible to the public. So 516 failed, but state, put your money where your mouth is and help us maintain our assets.
Okay.
Kurt? Nothing, Mayor.
Okay. Randy? Did you want to make any comment about your no vote for the budget? We'll go through the, okay. Okay, that sounds good. All right, Emily.
I was going to echo Ross's sentiments about Women's Weekend Out and also the Saturday night rally for trans, the trans community in Decorah. And I have to say it was one of my, it was hard not to feel proud of our community being on top of the courthouse steps and seeing such a wide, diverse group of people coming to support trans people and their fight against being recognized in this new passive legislation against gender affirming care for our youth. There's a lot going on and targeting and negativity, and I found it to be very positive about our community and the support that we offer everyone here. So thanks for everyone who turned out and for creating such a welcoming community here in Decorah.
Thank you. Kirsten?
Interested citizen asked me to announce a couple of good events we have coming up. So speaking of good news, on Tuesday, tomorrow night at 7 p.m. over here at Pulpit Rock Brewery, Dr. Steiner Bryn will be speaking. He's a Nobel Peace Prize nominee, and he'll be talking about the importance of maintaining dialogue in conflict situations. He'll be talking a lot about the Ukraine situation over there and stuff like that. So it's a great opportunity for people to get out and hear a really educated, well-informed person on that. And the second thing is, again, happening at Pulpit Rock, and it's Thursday at 7 o'clock. And there's an award-winning documentary called Invisible Hand. It's about the movement of rights of nature. Some city was filed suit governing the rights of nature or whatever, and it was a successful lawsuit, and how people can use that to keep their water safe and stuff like that. So 2 wonderful opportunities to get out and see some great things in our community. That's it.
I did attend the Human Rights Commission meeting that they had at the library. It was just on pronouns, and they are doing a series of language and communication. But it was very interesting, very well attended, very well informed. I thought they did a really good job, so I was happy that they did that. Okay, anything else? Move to adjourn? Thank you.